Welcome to the Telling of Story podcast. I'm your host, storyteller Jules, and along with my guests, it's my endeavour to explore the art and science of storytelling to attract, engage, and retain a business audience, and to unpack why it works for some and not for the many that try. Listen in as Geert talks about the correlation between systems and stories.
All the symptoms of things are going wrong with people and with the planet are based on systems, and systems are based on stories. So our idea when we founded Restory was, if we tell another story, maybe we can change the system, and then all those symptoms of 300,000 people or 500,000 people who aren't able to work, the pollution, everything, all those symptoms maybe can change also. So in our idea, it starts all with a story, because the economy we live in is also a story we believe in.
In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Geert Degrande. Geert is a journalist, copywriter, ghostwriter for more than 40 years. In 2021, he founded www.re-story.be. Geert, welcome to the show.
Good morning or good afternoon.
That has to be my shortest bio that I've ever read out on the podcast, but thank you for providing it. So you're going to have to help me out a little bit more and help the audience out just a little bit. Take me all the way back. You've been writing for more than 40 years, which is a fabulous effort. Well done. And continue to do so to this day, right? So take me all the way back. And when did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I think already when I was very young, when I was a child. I'm very fond of sports. Already as a little child, I made my own newspaper of the Tour de France of cycling. When I cut the articles in the newspapers and I put them in my own book and I wrote some comments on that. And in school, it seemed that I was very good at writing. When we had a task of writing, I was very good at it. And I'm coming from Belgium. You didn't mention it. I don't know but in Belgium we have two languages. We have Flemish speaking part. Flemish is Dutch, in fact, and we have a French speaking part. And part of my youth I spent also in France. So I am speaking the two languages. So together with my talents for writing, I knew very soon that I could help companies with translating. Because in Belgium, of course, we need the two languages. So I started working as a translator and a journalist after my military service. And that I did for, yes, indeed, more than 40 years. When I look back, I can say I worked 10 years. I've always done it as a freelancer. I've worked 10 years, more or less, writing for every client that asked me, for every newspaper, for every journal, for every magazine that asked me. Then I was 10 years active and very much in HR, and then 10 years in finance. And the last 10, 15 years, I worked a lot as a ghostwriter. Means writing books where other persons put their names on. I've written some 40 books, all about leadership, marketing, finance, coaching, that kind of things.
Did you say 40 or 14?
40.
40, wow.
Yes. And then one of the books I wrote was 7 years ago. And it was all about the fact that so many people, I don't know how it is in your country, but in Belgium we have a phenomenon of burnouts. So many people get burnout. And I wrote that book about that. And I talked mainly about the fact these burnouts come often from the problems with leaders, with the managers. It's often said you don't change jobs because of the job, but because of your manager.
Right.
And it was not to say that the managers are guilty, because most of the managers and those who have a leading role do this with the best intentions. But very often you have the problem that are growing, are making promotion. The example was always you have a very good nurse, and because of her competences as a nurse, she becomes a head nurse. And then she has to lead a team of 20, 25, 30 nurses, and there the problems start because that's another job than being a nurse simply.
Yes.
So that book was about that, and it was 7 years ago. Then we had in Belgium 300,000 people who were out of work, who weren't able to work anymore for more than a year. Of course, it's not all burnout. You have also people who have heavy accidents or cancer, but the number of burnouts is very high. So that puzzled me. And yeah, at the same time, I began to read about the fact that our economic system of the neoliberal capitalism is maybe one of the causes of the fact that so many people are, let's say, lost a little bit in their life or are searching or are suffering from burnout. But then I began to read books like The Donut Economy, written by Kate Raworth, or The Value of Everything, written by Mariana Mazzucato. And a lot of economists are saying we have to change our economic system, not only to preserve the planet, because you came across the World Overshoot Day, I think. Every year there's a day called World Overshoot Day, the day on which all our resources for that year are already used. And that day comes every year a little bit earlier in the year. I think this year it was March. The only year when it was later was when we had the pandemic, when there were no planes, when there was less traffic and so on. And in fact, you see all the symptoms of things are going wrong with people and with the planet. And all those symptoms are based on systems, and systems are based on stories. So, our idea when we founded Restory was if we tell another story, maybe we can change the system, and then all those symptoms of 300,000 people or 500,000 people who aren't able to work, the pollution, everything, all those symptoms maybe can change also. So, in our idea, it starts all with a story because the economy we live in is also a story we believe in. And that's the story of the neoliberal capitalism that has brought us very much after World War II. We were very prosperous, and everywhere in the world we have benefited from that system. But we see all those symptoms now that this comes to an end.
Mm.
And our belief and our conviction is that if we tell another story, by talking to people who open new ways in the society and in the economy, then we can also change the system and then we can make disappear all those symptoms of things that are going wrong with people and with the planet. And that's in short the reason why we started Restory.
Mm.
And in our opinion, the Restory must be a zebra economy. I don't know if you know that, if you heard about zebra economy. In fact, zebra economy is a name that was found by an American entrepreneur, a young woman, Mara Zepeda. When she had her startup, she didn't succeed to find money to fund her startup. Why? Because the venture capitalists were only interested in what they call the unicorns. A unicorn, maybe you heard about that. It's a name that is given to startups that rise very fast and have a value of $1 billion very soon.
Mm.
But Mara Sibida said, I don't want to be a unicorn because a unicorn, that's an animal, or I don't want that my company is named a unicorn because a unicorn is an animal that only exists in fairy tales.
Mm.
An animal to a company, for me, it must be a zebra. And this has two reasons. A zebra is an animal that takes care of the group of animals, that lets no animal behind. That's one reason. And of course, the most important characteristic of the zebra are the white and the black stripes. And she says, for me, that symbolizes, on the one hand, good financial results because a company has to make benefits. But on the other hand, the other color, whether it is white or black, it's the societal return. When you are an entrepreneur, you have to be aware of the fact that you have an impact on society, on the planet, on everything, on all the stakeholders that you work with. And in fact, it's very simple. And it's one of the initiatives that we saw also coming from other organizations. The OCDE, for example, has written a report, I think 3 years ago. It's called Beyond Growth, also to say the same thing. In corporates and in companies, you cannot only strive for financial benefits. You have to take into account the societal impact of what you are doing. OCDE report Beyond Growth. There were in America and the United States, I think 182 of the Forbes top 500 enterprises. The CEOs have signed the document, We Will Change Shareholder Capitalism into Stakeholder Capitalism. You have an initiative of the Pope Francis, and it's called The Economy of Francesco. And he gathers economists, young economists of all over the world. I think this initiative started also in the pandemic, so it had to be postponed twice. But afterwards, he got reunited in Assisi in Italy 100 economists of all the countries in the world, young economists who say, in fact, the same thing about the zebra economy. And the zebra economy, of the ideas of the zebra economy, are also now in the legal texts in Japan. If you want, I can send you some information about that.
It sounds incredibly interesting. Yeah, I'd love for you to send me some stuff on that, and I'll include it in the show notes if there's any links or anything to the information. Just let me take you back to what you mentioned there about burnout in Belgium. Statistically, is it worse there than anywhere else in the world, or is it in par with everybody? I mean, we see it here as well, but I'm not sure at a statistical level how we might compare. Is Belgium particularly bad, or?
Yeah, I think you can see it everywhere in the world. And of course, I don't know the statistics of other countries, certainly not in Australia, but I think it's a general phenomenon. You can, in France, for example, it's the same nearly. And you see that at all levels. One thing that's important is you see it at all levels, not only workers or blue collar, but also white collar. I know a lot of coaches who are working with high potentials, and it's not that they all have burnouts, but what I see, and especially after the pandemic, it's very notable that a lot of CEOs also are, or CFOs or CMOs, are really searching, and they are asking questions. What are we doing? What am I doing? Is this it? Is it all that word? Maybe because of the pandemic, they had time to reflect, and that has helped a little bit. But I think it's also the general conclusion. Of course, if you are a CEO and you have, I don't know, if you have a small company, you have maybe 50 or 100 employees. But when you see a percentage of 10% that is falling out and you have to look for replacement, then you are confronted constantly with that problem. I think that the scientific reports and the declarations of Antonio Guterres of the United Nations, I think it was 2 weeks ago when he said we are playing Russian roulette with the planet and we need to leave the highway that leads us to hell. We need to get out of this road. And it's incredible that so many people still don't see the urgence, I think. I don't know if you saw the movie Don't Look Up.
Yes. Yep.
It tells it all. It's that we are seeing. You have all the declarations of the scientists, and for me, particularly the declaration of Antonio Guterres, who says we are really playing Russian roulette. And still, many people do as if nothing is wrong. So, our goal is to tell stories on our platform, Restory, and that prove that it is possible to act otherwise and to try to have the zebra economy, but it can have many starting points. You can start on mobility, on food waste, on energy, on circular economy, on sharing economy. It has so many possibilities. But in the mainstream media, they don't get attention or don't get enough attention. Because what do we see about economy? It's still always the same story about GDP growth. When the Financial Times or whatever great newspaper talks about the economy, one example that strikes me very much is Black Friday. They say, 13 billions have been spent on Black Friday. And it means that the economy is going well. I don't know. I don't think it's the right way to look at it because it is. I think people must see now that if you take GDP growth as the only measure to talk about the health of the economy, it goes wrong. And there's another phenomenon. I think, in fact, you have, and that's in every country, I think, you have, on the one hand, you have some people who are extremely rich, and that group is growing. But on the other hand, you have more and more people who are poor, and neither of the two pays taxes. The rich don't pay taxes because they do nothing illegal, but they have so sophisticated ways to not pay taxes. And the poor can't pay taxes because it's every month a struggle to survive. So you have in between, you have a group of, the medium group, but this becomes smaller. And the pressure on this group is every day higher because they are the only ones who pay the taxes. And every nation is confronted with deficits because of they had to spend so many money for the pandemic, they had to spend so many money for the Ukraine war, and so on. So where do they look to find the money? Yeah, by taxing the medium group because the rich don't pay and the poor don't pay.
Right.
So in this medium group, you get also the financial stress more and more, and that leads also to these burnouts. So that this is a system that is going, towards bankruptcy.
Right. That
In
makes a lot of
in
sense.
in our opinion.
You mentioned something earlier, which I absolutely love, that what we do is based on systems, and the systems are based on the stories that we tell. And that's part of the reason you started Restory. Tell me a bit more about that, because I love that idea. How do you change the way a system works through stories? What's the goal there? How do you actually influence when these things are embedded often, right? So systems, economies, etc., but have been embedded for a long time across many different continents and industry and whatever. So how do you change the story in order to change the mega systems that exist?
Yeah, what we are trying to do is by giving examples. I've interviewed for Restory a very interesting lady from Great Britain, Hilary Cottam, who worked for the World Bank. And she says, in fact, you need to unite four pieces of the puzzle to come to this transition the world needs. The world needs. And you have what she calls the intellectuals, and that are all the academic people, like I told you, Kate Raworth, Mariana Mazzucato, Christian Felber. You have 30 or more already who wrote books about the need to change the system. That's the first piece of the puzzle, the intellectuals. Second, you have the politicians, but there she says it's very difficult because they are so focused on the short term, the next elections. They don't look further in the future. It's only the next elections. In that way, a very interesting book written by the husband or the partner of Kate Raworth is called Roman Krznaric, is The Good Ancestor. And it's about long term thinking, what we don't do anymore. But indigenous people, they have always had a tradition to take decisions and to take these decisions taking into account 7 generations further. He explains it in that book. Very interesting. I can send you this too. So intellectuals, politicians. Third, you have the entrepreneurs, and there she says it is key because if entrepreneurs, CEOs are taking the direction and are leaving the road to hell, as called by Guterres, by transforming the way they act and by adopting the principles of the zebra economy and by not only thinking about benefits for the shareholders, but by taking into account all the interests of the shareholders, then you have a really important key to change. But if that doesn't work, then she said, we will see, and I think you already begin to see it, it's revolution, like we had in history with the French Revolution, with the Russian Revolution, when all the medium class that pays all that taxes can't stand it anymore, then you will have revolution.
Mm.
I don't know if you saw in France, for example, if they talked about that in Australia, but you had the movement of the Gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets protesting. Yeah, they have been protesting for more than 2 years every weekend. So I think it's really possible that it comes from there. Until now, what you see is everywhere in Europe, and we saw it now with the European elections, you see that this revolution is not yet on the street or fighting, but in the voting. And so many people vote by despair for extreme right. And I think it's the same in the US with Trump. For me, I don't agree with what he's doing and telling, but for me, he's an excellent storyteller. He tells a story where he reaches so many people who believe that story. And that proves also the power of storytelling. So if you can have the same force and the same power with telling another story, a story of the zebra economy, a story of solidarity, a story of empathy, a story of co-working, a story of cooperation, then it's possible to change. And I think that's also those two movements are taking place at the same moment, because you see, again, I don't know how it is in Australia, but you see also much more companies that are led in another way. You can talk about steward ownership or cooperation. That's another fiscal or juridical statute, but it's also coming up. So you have the two movements. You have on the one hand the despair and the voting for extreme right and even the protesting in the streets. But on the other hand, you have also, and that is what we are trying to enlighten and to emphasize on Restory, you have the other movement of people who are working together locally, who are trying to do it differently, who are putting up businesses, taking into account what they are doing for society. Here in Belgium, we have, for example, an excellent example of a company that is active in student housing, and they do it very differently than traditionally. They work with student coaches. They start from the human aspects of the students, and then you can see that's fantastic. They are a zebra company, but they are also unicorn, because by acting that way, they have earned more money than the others who are doing it in the traditional way.
Does that list stop there? So the intellectuals, the politicians, then the entrepreneurs? Is there other people involved in change?
Yeah, everyone can be involved in change in a certain manner. But I'm only telling what Hillary Cotton told me.
Right.
Because I found it very insightful that she said you have the intellectuals, the politicians, the entrepreneurs, and the people. And that's in fact everyone. But there is the question, will it have to be by revolution and by protesting against something, or by acting positively and by demonstrating by example that it can be done differently, positively, with active hope? That's a concept of Joanna Macy. She calls it active hope. And I find it also very interesting. You can say we can hope for the best, but if you do nothing, it won't come. But you can hope for the best by acting in that direction.
Is that the premise of Restory, to enlighten us or accelerate the spread of some of these fabulous organizations that are thinking a little bit differently, thinking outside of the box, trying to instill change?
Yeah, surely. But one remark on that, we don't use thinking out of the box, because if you use those words, thinking out of the box, you are not changing radically enough, because in that case, the box stays your reference point. So, in fact, you have to throw away the box to start something new. There was an American philosopher in the 18th century, I think, and he was inspired by the Greek philosopher Socrates when he said, if you want to change things, you don't have to fight against, but you have to build a new system that makes the old one obsolete.
I love that.
And that's what we are trying to do by saying also, yeah, it's another story. It's not the story you read every day again in the traditional newspapers about the economy and about the way the economy is considered. It is something new. And therefore, that is difficult because we are so, yeah, there are so many things that we think about as it is and we can't change it. It's the word of Reagan and Thatcher. There is no alternative. But there is an alternative, and that is what we are trying to say. And that is what we are trying to tell stories about. One thing that is not so, yeah, that explains also that it's difficult is that it's, as I said, many people are doing already good things and things that can help to realize the transition and the change. But it's, yeah, for many people on their own island a little bit. When they are active in food waste or when they are active in energy, that they don't see the other things that, and all is connected. I refer often to the Stanford speech of Steve Jobs when he said connecting the dots, and that's about when he talked about that was about technology, but you can also connect the dots in the way we are trying to tell another story about the economy.
Good. What's the ultimate goal for Restory? Where do you want it to go? Where would you love to see it?
We would like to contribute a little bit with our talents to change the world, to take that exit where Guterres talked about, when we can have, and we have also chosen cooperation, cooperative society. We have now 120 members of our cooperation. And that's also different because we are the only, in Belgium, we are the only media platform that works in that with that statute.
I love Restory. I've been looking through it avidly over the last few days just as part of the research, and they're beautiful stories. And I really like the way you've sort of split the categorization, particularly the top three amongst thinkers, doers, and makers is my favorite three sort of categories. That you've got economy, education, agriculture, and food, society. So there's a number of different categories. I do love the way you've split that. So for anybody listening, go have a look at restory.be, re-story.be. It's a fabulous bit of writing, quite a lot of writing, in fact. And one of the things I did love about the storytelling in there is that often you would end with a question to sort of prompt some commentary. So to sort of wrap up today's session, you and I could talk storytelling clearly for quite a long time, and you're obviously passionate about storytelling. You've been doing it your entire life. But I'd like to ask you one of your own questions from the website itself, which I think is a good segue from where you've just come from. So the question was this: being meaningful, what does that look like in your life?
Being meaningful is, yeah, trying to live Restory and to listen. That's very important, listening. And when you talked about makers, that's also a thing that is missing very much. And of course, with the extreme right votes, it will be missed more. That is that artists don't get many possibilities to express themselves. And artists are, for me, yeah, you can call it the photographers of the time, but not only by photography, of course, but what they are doing with theater, with sculpture. They are showing, they are visualizing the symptoms I talked about, the symptoms that we see about illness, about burnout, about climate, heat, about flood, everything. And artists are symbolizing that. And for me, yeah, it's important to tell their stories also. So meaning is, yeah, what is meaningful to listen to people and try to tell. You can look at things in another way. One sentence I use very often also is this: you have the fact that every medal has two sides. Huh? I don't know if that's an expression in English too, but maybe you can look at a cube. There are six sides on a cube, and maybe it's important to look differently at things. And the meaning, what is meaningful, is, yeah, to open eyes and to tell you can look at things differently and be open. Don't go with the actual flow of this is right and this is wrong, because I'm very passionate about zebra economy, but that doesn't mean that I judge everything from neoliberal capitalism. It has brought us many things. I had another podcast in Holland when the interviewer asked me, does that mean that before you started Restory, you were right and now you are on the left side, politically spoken? And that is not true. It is, I think it goes beyond that. The only way we can get off this highway to hell is by working together.
Yeah.
Co-working, co-sourcing, co-financing, co-housing. It must be together, because one of the things also of one of the stories we have been told is we are all individuals and we have to find solutions on ourselves. And if you do that, you're a hero and you are successful and so on. But if you can't, or if you are unlucky, you are a loser. And that is also one of the things, together with that taxing thing that I explained, that is also one of the reasons you have so many burnouts and so many people who are really searching and looking how they can change, what they can do, and so on. So, yeah, telling the message that if we want to solve the problems and the poly crisis we are in, it has to be together. And together, that means together with people, but together with nature, certainly, and together with AI. Why not?
Thank you so much. You've left me a hell of a lot to think about, and I'm sure the listeners have got a few things to ponder over as well. Where can the audience find out a little bit more about you?
About me on my LinkedIn profile,
Okay.
and about Restory on the site you mentioned.
Okay, I'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to reading some of the material that you're going to send through.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and bye-bye.
There was a lot to unpack in that discussion. For me, change the story, change the world. Much love. Chat soon.